Well, folks, it's official. Joe Biden has formally announced his decision to select Senator Kamala Harris of California as his vice presidential running mate. Now, this doesn't come as a surprise to most people. You know, there have been rumors swirling the past few months that Joe Biden would pick Kamala, but it still comes off as extremely tone deaf, picking the self-proclaimed top cop of California as his choice. Something about nationwide and global protests and the self-proclaimed top cop, those don't go together all that well. Now, specifically, as a progressive, I'm not the happiest with this decision, for multiple reasons, which I'll go into now. But first, I'll acknowledge that it is a historic moment. This is the first woman of color on a major presidential ticket in history. So for that reason, I can see people being inspired. I can see people that would be willing to vote for Kamala Harris to see a vice president woman of color. But when you look at the policy, it's also important to look at the policy and understand why it is that a portion of the Democratic Party doesn't jive too well with Senator Kamala Harris. Let's first take a look at the Democratic presidential primaries and a moment that was applauded by many people when Senator Kamala Harris did a brutal takedown of Joe Biden on his record in regards to busing. Joe Biden was opposed to busing, and Senator Kamala Harris was someone who this policy of busing actually impacted. Take a look at what Senator Kamala Harris had to say during the presidential debates.
When you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground, but I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
Now, I think we can all acknowledge how brutal of a takedown that was. Senator Kamala Harris attacking Joe Biden for his opposition to busing, a policy that would have desegregated schools, and Kamala herself being impacted by that policy. That little girl was her, remember her saying that? That little girl was her. She even came out with t-shirts that said, "That little girl was me." So this was a big moment in taking down Joe Biden for his segregationist thinking. But later on, when on an interview with late night host Stephen Colbert, take a look at what Kamala Harris had to say about this powerful moment that spoke to so many people.
And how do you go from being such a passionate opponent on such bedrock principles for you, and now you guys seem to be pals?
It was a debate.
Not everybody landed punches like you did, though.
It was a debate.
So you don't mean it?
It was a debate. That the whole reason, literally, it was a debate. It was called a debate.
I understand.
Traveled to the debate.
So this is one of the most political answers that I've ever seen. Stephen Colbert pressing Kamala Harris to kind of explain that moment a little bit more, talk about that a little bit more, and how they may have overcome this divide that they were experiencing. And Kamala Harris saying, it was a debate. It was a debate. As if it being a debate negates everything that she said. She took a principled stance at the time, taking down Joe Biden for opposing busing. That was a powerful moment. And then all of a sudden, it's just a debate? Are we living in some bizarro world where things that you say on the debate stage don't even matter anymore? Is that the world we're living in? Now, this was an obvious play for the VP seat, Because someone genuine would have said something along the lines of, well, Joe Biden was wrong then, and he's come around to his ways. But that wasn't her answer. It was just the debates. Oh, it's just the debates. That was fairly phony to me. And one of the reasons that people feel like they can't trust Kamala. So next, let's move on to Kamala's political positions. So if you'll remember, Kamala Harris in 2014 was running for Attorney General. And she was giving an interview where she was asked about her opponent's stance on legalized marijuana. Take a look at Kamala's response in 2014 about legalized marijuana.
In the face of grave danger.
We asked California's current top cop, Kamala Harris, for her position on this controversial issue. Your opponent, Ron Gold, has said that he is for the legalization of marijuana recreationally. Your thoughts on that?
That he is entitled to his opinion.
So you have Kamala Harris there laughing about the prospect of legalized marijuana in one of the most liberal states in 2014 at a time when several states had already legalized marijuana and at the very least decriminalized it. But she just laughs at it. How silly of my opponent to want to support legalized recreational marijuana in the state of California. Now, I'll give her some credit. She eventually came around to the idea of legalizing recreational marijuana. I believe she did as she was running for president in this recent primary. Take a look at her discussing her position on legalized marijuana on The Breakfast Club.
Not all drugs are the same. And when we're talking about marijuana, look, I have forever been an advocate for medicinal marijuana. I have personally known people who only benefited from its use. So there are a lot of reasons why we need to legalize.
Have you ever smoked?
I have.
Okay. Like in
And
college,
I inhaled. I did inhale.
Okay.
It was a long time ago. But yes.
I know you have to go. They say you have to go. I just wanted to
I
ask.
just broke loose.
I mean, was it in college? See, I like stuff like that. That's a real honest answer.
Real.
Was it a blunt or joint?
It was a joint.
Hey.
Yeah.
You remember the high?
I do.
So if it was legalized all throughout the country and medicinal, would you do it?
Listen, I think that it gives a lot of people joy, and we need more joy.
We need more joy in this world.
Another.
What do you listen to? Because I know she has to go. So what does Kamala Harris listen to?
What were you
What's your
listening to when
favorite-
you was high? What was on? What song was it?
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, definitely Snoop. Tupac.
So the way she's acting and laughing and palling around in that interview, you'd have thought that she supported legalized marijuana all her life. She was smoking it in college. She was listening to all this music. She recognizes that people use it to be happy. But that's not the case. She took a tough on crime stance in regards to legalized marijuana. So she gets points for eventually coming around to support legalized marijuana. But all this time before that, she took a tough on crime stance with it. Now, this isn't the only time that Kamala Harris has been tough on crime. Take a look at this talk that she was giving in 2013, which is especially relevant now when she was discussing the idea of putting more funding towards schools as opposed to building more police stations or prisons. Take a look at that talk that she was giving.
I have friends like Eva Patterson. Okay, so I say with all love and warmth that part of the concern also for people who are progressive thinking and liberal minded, or just progressive thinking in terms of just fix it, is that we all have these posters in our closet that is attached to a stick that we sometimes will card out when we're talking about criminal justice policy and those statistics that you first heard when we opened it up, incarceration. And we run around with these signs, build more schools, less jails. Build more schools, less jails. And we walk around everywhere, build more schools, we protest, build more schools, less jails. Put money into education, not prisons. There's a fundamental problem with that approach, in my opinion. And it's this. I agree with that conceptually, but you have not addressed the reason I have 3 padlocks on my front door. So part of the discussion about reform of criminal justice policy has to be an acknowledgement that crime does occur, and especially when it is violent crime and serious crime, well, there should be a broad consensus that there should be serious and severe and swift consequence to crime.
So that clip was from 2013. You have Kamala Harris here making fun of the idea of putting more money towards schools as opposed to funding police, which is exactly the conversation that's going on today. And many people actually support that idea of putting more money towards schools and less money to the police. The police are already overfunded as is. What she's failing to understand there is that when you put money towards schools, there's less crime. That's just how it works. There's more opportunity for these kids and less of a reason to steal or to gangbang. That's how it works. You would think that the top cop would understand that, but no. She's got her own priorities and she's got her own agenda, which includes funding the police. This isn't the only time that Kamala has made comments on schools. Take a look at this clip from a few years ago when Kamala was discussing criminalizing the parents of truant students. Criminalizing the parents of students who didn't attend class. Take a look at that.
I would not be standing here were it not for the education I received. And I know many of us will say the same thing. And I believe a child going without an education is tantamount to a crime. So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. Well, this was a little controversial in San Francisco. And frankly, my staff went bananas. They were very concerned because we didn't know at the time whether I was going to have an opponent in my re-election race. But I said, look, I'm done. This is a serious issue, and I've got a little political capital, and I'm going to spend some of it. And this is what we did. We recognized that in that initiative, as a prosecutor and law enforcement, I have a huge stick. The school district has got a carrot. Let's work in tandem around our collective objective and goal, which is to get those kids in school. So, to that end, on my letterhead, now let me tell you something about my letterhead. When you're the DA of a major city in this country, usually the job comes with a badge. And there is often an artistic rendering of said badge on your stationery. So I sent a letter out on my letterhead to every parent in the school district, outlining the connection that was statistically proven between elementary school truancy, high school dropouts, who will become a victim of crime, and who will become a perpetrator of crime. We sent it out to everyone. A friend of mine actually called me and he said, Kamala, my wife got the letter. She freaked out. She brought all the kids into the living room, held up the letter, said, if you don't go to school, Kamala's going to put you and me in jail. Yes, we achieved intended effect.
That is a knee slapper, Kamala. What a good joke. Arresting the parents of truant kids. That's so hilarious. It's really funny to me that you're laughing about the fact that you're going to arrest the parents of truant kids. You know this is a policy position that disproportionately impacts low-income families, right? So you think that by creating this crime, criminalizing parents for their kids, that's something that's going to work out well? A tough on crime stance. You see, the thing about Kamala Harris is that she only takes this tough on crime stance when it disproportionately impacts low-income families. You see, Kamala Harris, or Kamala rather, decided not to prosecute Steve Mnuchin, you know, Treasury guy Steve Mnuchin, when his bank One West Bank illegally foreclosed on homes, she decided not to prosecute Steve Mnuchin. In fact, she took a campaign donation from Steve Mnuchin. She took money from him. So when it comes to prosecuting the rich and powerful, let's save it for another day. When it comes to prosecuting people for marijuana offenses, she locked up 1,800 people for that. When it comes to prosecuting and locking up parents, single mothers, and single fathers of truant kids, go for it. Go right for it. Let's do it. Let's lock them up. You know, Kamala Harris, she actually had to dismiss 1,000 drug-related cases because someone that was working within the lab facility contaminated a bunch of cases because he was stealing drugs. So that messed all of these cases up, and she actually attempted to block this information from the public view. Eventually, when it came out, she dismissed all 1,000 cases that were associated with this one lab guy, but she attempted to block that information from coming into light. How wild is this? How wild is this? She also fought to give money to people that were wrongfully convicted. Can you believe that? This is all true. This is all true. And so many people were wrongfully convicted under Kamala's tenure. And lastly, she blocked trans prisoners from being able to access gender reassignment surgery. She really did that. She really did. So when you take all of this information and you roll it up into a little ball and you say, here you go, progressives. This is your vice presidential nominee. You have top cop Kamala Harris and crime bill 94 Joe Biden. You can kind of understand why we're not so excited about this. You kind of get the idea why we wouldn't want this person as the vice presidential nominee. So that's my view as a progressive. I can't speak for, the moderates of the party. I can imagine that they're very excited about the media darling Kamala Harris. But progressives aren't. Let's just get that straight. Now, if I were Donald Trump's campaign, I would, instead of saying Kamala Harris is the most radical left person, I would hit her from the left and say, look at all this stuff that you did. Locked up 1,800 people for crime-related offenses. Sought to keep this information from the public that would dismiss 1,000 drug-related cases. Against gender reassignment surgery. I would do that if I were Joe Biden, but he's not going to do that. So better for the Democrats in that position. But, those are just my thoughts as a progressive. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Agree or disagree, let's have a conversation. And subscribe to join the political revolution against mainstream media. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they're all bought and paid for. Independent progressive media is the path forward. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.